Daji, a follow-up question to the same. Uh, since you mentioned about the protein part, I just want to go a little back towards that place. A 27-year-old today who is into any sort of fitness is consuming some sort of protein powder, mostly in the metro cities. And latest, there was a survey which mentioned that 70% of the protein brands which are being supplied in our country are either having toxic elements or they are not good for health. But still, because maybe their trainers are suggesting them, they're doing this thing. And there's one big question which vegetarians get. These days, if we go over the internet, there is always this thing that per pound of weight you need to consume X amount of protein in order to sustain really well. So I have two questions over here. First, if we look into our Indian ancestors, they never used to micro calculate that this is the amount of protein I am taking, this is the amount of carbs I am taking. But these days the youth is doing that. And the second one is for a vegetarian, specifically when you remove non-veg from the constituents, they hardly have options around to consume protein, if this is a fact which we need to maintain. And that's why they have to consume these supplements. What's your take on that?
I have a long.
We are all ears.
See, first let's look at it one way of understanding this diet. Who has standardized fat, carbs, and protein intake? Have we standardized for Indian population? Or is it based on United States and Canadian reports? That number one has to be understood. Number two, generational food habit. That also weighs a lot on genetic exposition. How? I'll explain to you in a minute. We were taught in our pharmacy days, one case scenario that a postman, mailman, who goes from house to house delivering mails, almost 6 hours a day, he's on his foot. Rain or snow, mailman is always going to work. He perhaps walks about 10 miles, roughly about 16, 17 kilometers a day. Okay. He retires at the age of 58 or so. After his retirement, 6 months later, he goes to his physician. And physician said, you are diabetic. Okay. Now, what changed suddenly in 6 months? During his working phase, he was perfectly all right. Anyone would envy his physical health condition. But within 6 months, he contracted diabetes type 2. Change of lifestyle. From very active lifestyle to passive lifestyle. So what happens? Your insulin delivery is the same like before, but your cells are not adapting. It is not active enough to consume the carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are spilled over into the blood because they are not being burnt. Insulin is there, but it is not getting burnt by your cellular activities. And it gets spilled into the blood, and that's why there's a spike of sugar in the blood. Okay. And now this is simply because of the change of lifestyle just within 6 months. Okay. Now when generations after generations after generations, my forefathers had been vegetarian. And suddenly I changed my habits. Start eating eggs, high protein stuff, consuming meat. And also I don't fit into their lifestyle because they had a very specific lifestyle. You see, they would go to bed by 9 perhaps or 8 o'clock in the evening. Their food habits were very disciplined. Now, because of our lifestyle, we eat whatever, whenever, wherever. And our thought patterns are also not in tune with their thinking also, because everything would be mentioned. When, how, where, and how, attitude. They all affect my cells, my chromosomes, my DNA. My DNAs were inherited from my forefathers who were exposed to certain lifestyle. Now, my DNAs are adjusting to my thought patterns, my lifestyle, and it takes time. It takes a very long time for adaptation. So there is a kind of a chaos. Faster the change, greater the change, there is a difficulty to adjust.
Wow.
Imagine in your corporate world, one boss comes, gone, next boss comes, new rules every single week. How will the employee cope up with this change?
Difficult.
Imagine at a cellular level, the change that we impose upon our body, or not just a change, changes that we impose at a multiple level. See, their thought patterns, our elders' thought patterns, their mental abilities, their emotional well being, you compare that with ours, it's not the same. There is so much of gap. Okay.
Right.
There are many things which are good, there are many things which are bad. But gap is there. We are not analyzing what is good, what is bad. This widening of the gap creates a discord. So it cannot remain in sync. I tell you how the inner environment or the external environment can change my genetic pattern.
Okay.
For example, mother to be who is exposed to violent neighborhoods, violent homes. She doesn't even know when husband would return home, if at all. And if at all he returns, he is with a gun and sleeps with a gun under his pillow. One of the Brooklyn studies by Dr. Bruce Lipton, he describes all these things. And when he studied all these things, he thought, okay, mothers to be who are always in the stress, they are under sympathomimetic responses. Stress hormones are circulating. And when stress hormones are circulating, what happens then? You see, whenever you are in a fight or flight mode, either your hands will be active, and if you cannot fight with your hands, your legs will be active to run away from the situation, or you would hide. The three things. So the blood circulation will be more in your arms and legs, in your limbs, at the cost of blood circulation, which will be nourishing your abdomen, your liver, your lungs, your heart, and the brain. So blood supply is diverted. Now imagine the same blood circulating in mother's womb. Child, that growing embryo has nothing to do with the external situation, but the baby's limbs also will receive more blood at the cost of visceral organs. So such children will have very poor digestive abilities. And since the blood supply is less in the frontal cortex, their thinking ability was greatly reduced. That blood supply will be more in this amphibian brain, the back part of the brain, and they're very snappy, very fast in responding things with anger.
Oh.
So you can see how genetics is changing just because of your thought pattern and the environment you are having. Environment can be anything, but if you have a control over your mind,
Okay.
then you are better off. That's why in India we have the system that as soon as a daughter-in-law is found to be pregnant, with a lot of respects and puja and reverence is sent back to her parents' place,
Mothers.
where
Yeah.
environment will be a lot better. It's much familiar. It's not that Sasural is bad, but there is some sort of
Wow.
ease. You feel at home. And that's where you can spend time in puja, you can reflect, you can contemplate, you can do meditation. And this is how, in our older tradition, the children were brought up. So
Wow.
it has a direct impact
Wow.
on the future of our future generations. It depends on mothers,
Wow.
their thinking, their way of life, lifestyle. But it's a questionable thing today. You see, I have observed that boys are nowhere near girls' impulsiveness and their fickleness. Girls are more fickle than boys.
Oh.
If I have heard boy having a one girlfriend or two girlfriends, I have seen girls having dozens of boyfriends. This is just a
Okay.
comparison. There
Oh.
may be some exceptions,
Okay.
but this is the trend. And I am not saying just from the hat. I have received letters. And the direct example is my own son. When he was in the 8th grade in St. Xavier's Loyola in Ahmedabad, he was a star basketball player representing for the state
Wow.
in his age group, right? 9th grader used to date him. He said, "Would you come out with us?" He used to ask me, "Dad, what should I do?" You just tell them you have a girlfriend in the United States. So they'll quietly run away. Why do you want to refuse and say you're not,
True.
And this is the story of 1996 or 97.
Oh,
Right? Imagine now how the world would have advanced in 2024.
has actually changed a lot. Wow. So, Daji, before I